the Global Center for the Responsibility to Protect. I want to bring to you a recap, or better still, to play to you something of a presentation and a public meeting, a webinar that was talking about the conflict in the Cameroons. Don't forget that the Southern Cameroon's conflict is still top on the agenda. It is still among the top 10 most neglected crises, or better still, conflict in the world. So I want to bring to you this excerpt, and I hope that you will get an insight of what is happening. The international community's reluctance to dive into these issues, to sort these things out once and for all. Ladies and gentlemen, fellow Ambazonians, my name is Fabiano Deco, Ambazonian and human rights activist. I am coming to you this day with update from what is happening around the world, especially in Southern Cameroon. We've had international partners, international organizations, institutions talking about the crisis in the Cameroons. I want you to watch this excerpt and I'll be right back.
That takes us back to that map. Please have a look at the neighborhood in which those people are, because it is a troubled neighborhood. I am now going to ask Juliet Power to speak. Juliet is, sorry, I'm struggling to turn off this. Juliet is from, Juliet Power is from the Global Center for the Responsibility to Protect. I know a lot of people on this call will rely on her research to keep them up to date. We are really honored to have her with us this afternoon and this evening. She has, frankly, too many academic qualifications for me to read out. But one thing I found very interesting was that she had interned at the International Criminal Court in The Hague. And I think many of the people on this call will be looking forward to the moment when those complicit in the gross human rights abuses that have been happening since 2016 are held to account at the ICC. So it is with great pleasure that I hand over to Juliet, and with thanks.
Thank you so much, Rebecca, for your kind introduction. And thanks for having me on this panel today. It's an important event. You know, we cannot discuss the situation in Cameroon often enough. So thank you so much for being here. And your introduction already described the situation. Like, since 2016, more than 3,000 people have been killed as a result of the conflict. And the United Nations estimates that at least 750,000 people have been displaced. And the targeting of individuals based upon their cultural identity poses a direct threat to civilians and may amount to war crimes or crimes against humanity. And the government continues to deny the severity of the crisis and has failed to address the root causes of the Anglophone conflict or provide a political means for resolving it. So how did we get to this point? Like, what caused the Anglophone conflict? What precisely is going on? And why is it so difficult to solve the conflict? And what is the role of the international community? And as you already shortly introduced just now, like, in order for us to fully understand the current conflict, the grievances, the violence, but also the international community's inability to bring an end to the conflict, we have to look more closely to the country's history. While the identities of the Anglophone and the Francophone people of Cameroon link back to the time of colonialism, they continue to live on after decolonization, during Cameroon's independence, and in the present time. So over the next couple of minutes, I would like to dive a little bit deeper into three things that stem from the history of Cameroon, but are relevant to understand the present day conflict. And first of all, that's the resilience of those identities, which are shaped by colonialism, but continue to live on in the world today. And secondly, while the conflict is often understood as a conflict between Anglophones and Francophones, it's in fact a conflict between the Anglophones and the Francophone-dominated regime. The two presidents of Cameroon have shown little interest in granting the Anglophone people their freedoms, in addressing their grievances, and they have not protected all Cameroonians equally. And thirdly, the international community is failing to bring an end to the conflict, which is partly a consequence of this complicated history. But first, let's start by discussing the resilience of those identities and where these identities stem from. So as you've already mentioned, Rebecca, like following Germany's defeat in the First World War, it renounced all sovereignty over all the African colonies, including Cameroon. It was the League of Nations who then decided who was going to rule over these former German colonies and mandated Britain and France in 1922 to administer the area of Cameroon. So the French mandate was known as Cameroon, and the British territory was administered as two areas, the Northern Cameroons and Southern Cameroons. And when the League of Nations ceased to exist in 1946, most of these mandate territories were administered to the UN Trusteeship Council, with the aim to prepare them for eventual independence. So in 1960, French Cameroon and Nigeria shortly after gained their independence. And the question that was raised at that time was what to do with those British territory of the Northern and Southern Cameroons. And after some discussion, a plebiscite was agreed to and held on the 11th February of 1961, which was highly controversial. The people were given the choice between achieving independence by joining the Independent Federation of Nigeria or achieving independence by joining the Independent Republic of Cameroon. And the Muslim majority of Northern area opted for a union with Nigeria, and the Southern area voted to join Cameroon. And language is important here because the opinion of independence was not on the ballot. It was achieving independence by joining another state. A report says that the UK thought at that time that the territory of the Southern Cameroons was not economically viable to stand on its own as a sovereign state. So Southern Cameroons became part of Cameroon on the 1st of October 1961 to form the Federal Republic of Cameroon. And most Southern Cameroonians consider this day of the 1st of October as the day that they gained independence. So this is where the Anglophone and the Francophone division emanated from. But in order for us to understand why this continues to be relevant today, we have to look more closely at the way in which Cameroon, including the Southern Cameroons, were governed following the independence. And by joining the Federal Republic of Cameroon, the deal was that Southern Cameroon would be given substantial autonomy within the federal system. This has never been the case. From the beginning, Anglophones felt unfairly treated and marginalized. Following a referendum in 1972, a new constitution was adopted in Cameroon, which replaced a federal state with a decentralized unitary state. So the Southern Cameroons lost its autonomous status and became the Northwest and Southwest provinces of the Republic of Cameroon. So President Paul Biya, who became president in 1982, pushed the envelope even further. The Southern Cameroons were annexed into a united republic, and in 1984, the word united was even scrapped. The country became the Republic of Cameroon, and the English-speaking region was assimilated into the French-speaking area. So the Southern Cameroonians never got what they were told to get as soon as they became part of the Republic of Cameroon. There's no decentralized unitary state. There's no equal status of French and English as official languages. Local authorities with administrative and financial autonomy were never established. So over the years, this dissatisfaction with the French-dominated regime continued to grow. The government continued to appoint Francophone magistrates who spoke no English, had no training in common law, to preside over courts in the Anglophone regions. The government also continued to post Francophone teachers who spoke no English to teach subjects in Anglophone schools. And Paul Biya is the second longest ruling president in the world. And he is part of a generation of leaders that represents the one party, one man rule. He took power in 1982 and hold on to it ever since. Where other countries have gained freedoms, democracies, and rights, and have attempted to overcome the old injustices of colonialism, Paul Biya continues to rule with an iron fist. So these decades of dissatisfaction and structural marginalization eventually culminated in the onset of the peaceful protest in several cities in the English-speaking region by teachers, students, and lawyers. This quickly escalated when security forces used excessive force against peaceful protesters. And since 2016 until present day, the harsh and violent response by Cameroonian security forces and the little interest the government and Paul Biya has shown in addressing the grievances led to an increased radicalization of Anglophones and the escalation into a full-blown armed conflict. So the Cameroonian army is currently fighting with armed separatists, and the civilians are bearing the brunt of it. In their effort in neutralizing armed groups, the Cameroonian security forces have perpetrated extrajudicial killings, burned Anglophone villages, and subjected individuals with alleged separatist ties to ill treatment and torture. Security forces have also been accused of sexual and gender-based violence. And armed separatists have also perpetrated abuses, including kidnapping and killing of civilians. They have banned government education and frequently attacked schools and teachers, resulting in 80% of the schools in the two regions being closed or destroyed. And the ongoing violence between government forces and separatist groups has also direct impact on the humanitarian actors. And in 2020, it has progressively translated into a significant increase in violence against aid workers. A humanitarian and development actors on the ground are frequently questioned by armed actors on suspected or perceived association with the other side. The anxiety brought by this uncertainty leaves humanitarians in an unsafe working environment. So this brings us to where we're at today. Thousands of people have been killed, hundreds of thousands have been displaced or crossed the border with Nigeria. Schools are closed, public life is disrupted, people live in fear and feel abandoned by the international community. And yet it has not resulted in genuine and systematic mediation efforts. There are no large relief programs, not enough diplomatic pressure on the government and armed groups, and there's little media attention. So Paul Biya's national dialogue that was launched in October 2019 has not led to any results, and fighting continues unabated. Other mediation attempts, including the Swiss-led process, have not been able to put an end to the fighting. Countries with strong ties with Cameroon, including donor nations, as well as regional countries and the African Union, have not put the necessary pressure on the parties of the Anglophone conflict. And the Security Council has remained completely silent on the matter. And this brings me back to the history of Cameroon, which has a strong international dimension. The international community has failed to uphold its obligations to successfully decolonize Cameroon. There's this legacy of colonialism and fear about criticizing allies for not confronting human rights abuses and atrocities that makes many actors in the international community a passive actor when it comes to addressing the human rights situation in Cameroon. It is hard for the United Kingdom and France to confront their unresolved business stemming from the colonial history, and that continues to live forward in the present day. Like France, for example, is a country with a strong historic ties with Cameroon, not only linguistically and culturally, but also economically, and in terms of development assistance, as trading partner, and in providing military training. And France has preferred behind-the-scenes diplomacy, bilateral engagement directly with President Paul Biya. So it's a very cautious and careful approach. But this has not led to an improvement of the situation. And because France is also a permanent member of the Security Council, it's very unlikely that the Security Council will address the situation anytime soon. Unfortunately, the United Kingdom has a much stronger voice in condemning the violence in the Anglophone regions. And while there seems to be an increased attention in the international community for the situation in Cameroon, following the attacks in Kumba in November 2020 and in Mautu in February 2021, it is important to know that attention for these big attacks in Cameroon are a great first step, but the international community must realize that civilians are suffering from fear and intimidation, from human rights abuses and atrocities on a daily basis, and that those bigger attacks are only the tip of the iceberg. So much more needs to be done by the African Union, the Security Council, the Human Rights Council, and powerful states to put pressure on the government of Cameroon and the separatist groups to hold credible, inclusive, and transparent negotiations, to find a political solution, and to end the conflicts for once and for all. I will stop there. Thank you.
That was Juliette Powe, of course, at the Global Center for the Responsibility to Protect. And you got everything. You got everything. There is little attention from the international community because of La République du Cameroon's strong ties with France. France is the one who is standing on the way You will not understand. The UK has been more vocal in the conflict more than France. And if you got the information very well, you will understand that this crisis is rooted in history. And like Juliet Powell said, this conflict is as a result of an incomplete decolonization process. An incomplete decolonization process. This is exactly the reason why we have this conflict today. And Britain and France, they are not man enough to rise up and take their responsibility. Yes, they are not man enough. They are not, they have not mustered the courage to rise up and take their responsibility and let this thing solve this problem once and for all. Now, Juliet Paul ended by saying civilians are at the high level of risk. They are highly exposed because they are mostly targeted. And she also made mention of the fact that the people of Southern Cameroons will so much welcome a long-lasting, permanent political solution. I want you to underline that word, political solution. Political solution. When you underline the word political solution, you agree with me that there is more to pen and paper than the force that is being used on the ground. And we are all of the opinion that negotiations is better than force because no matter how you force something, you will never erase the idea or the spirit of nationalism in the people of Southern Cameroon. You can never. You can only try to suppress them, but you will never erase the spirit of nationalism that they already have now. Ambazonia is on the lips of everyone. On the lips of everyone. There's nothing you can do about it. You cannot take it away from them. It is already a born ideology. It is already a born ideology, and it is just waiting for that rightful moment to actualize itself and manifest it in the physical. Thank you very much again for watching. I don't come and tell when I say this, so I don't hear Twitter, I don't talk. I don't want to talk me over. I don't want to go detail plenty there. But I think say this, so it be good. Say I always bring it in the phone. I'm Siam. You understand? I know. Me, my name is Fabiano. I be food soldier. I work outside. And when I see information where you find, I bring a phone. Muna know say this, so they work this, so now it didn't for advantage. You understand? When you hear me, I can't hammer on top some person. I can't call some person name for my platform for him my screen where you watch him. I call a name, they talk about the person that because he do thing the way no fine. He do thing the way he instead put was struggle at risk. The thing the way he do him, fine. Me stop for the do him because at the same thing the way a kelebe they do him. If a kelebe they do kale you do kidnap. Then what if the thing between you and a kelebe? Then you don't want to say my talker. You want them to clap for you. Man can clap for you. Say a good thing you do him. You don't understand no. So now the thing is that I know I don't enter for kind place there. I see kind thing there. I hear kind thing there. You understand? This struggle on our own, it didn't for our hand. Now me and you will get for take and go. But people they only want drag with for back. People they only want drag with for back. With their baba thing they want for ground zero. Fine. Need they change their ways. Now just the thing what they talk. Need they change their ways. When I don't hear to that woman, don't talk. Imagine say this, so we will come together. We'll collaborate fine. We'll talk one voice. We'll put up for La Republic skin. Go to put up for their skin. Oh ha. They'll come on run no. They'll come on run. No, take our country. No, take our country. I did tell you now. So thank you very much. If you see this in, if you share a video for any person, as well as you get to any other area, then thank you for watching and have a nice time.